This podcast contains our own personal views not associated with any organisation. Coronial contains descriptions of death inquests that may be graphic and disturbing to some listeners. Discretion is advised. Hi everyone and welcome back to today's episode of Coronial. I'm Emma.
I'm Alice.
And I'm Georgie.
So in today's episode, we're going to talk about the coroner's inquest into the death of Zoe Stephanie Woolmer. Zoe was a 23-year-old English woman. She travelled to Australia in August 2013 on a 12-month working visa. She had recently completed an honours degree back in the UK and decided to take a gap year and travel around Australia and a few other countries in the Pacific region. She had based herself in Sydney, working part-time at a recruitment agency, and then had taken a few side trips to different parts of Australia. So in June 2014, Zoe flew from Sydney to Alice Springs in Central Australia to take part in a 3-day tour of Australia's Red Centre.
You're really keen on the Northern Territory stuff.
Their stories.
Also, I know exactly which story this is now.
You do?
I have no idea. So
Their stories are just so interesting.
True. Because it's a place like no other place in the world,
Yeah,
right? There's just
it
all
is.
these things that would never happen anywhere else.
That's exactly right. So every time I read one of their inquests, I'm just like, oh my God. Anyway, on the first day of the tour, Zoe, along with 16 other tourists, were picked up by their tour bus early in the morning and travelled out to Kings Canyon in Wataka National Park, which is about 3.5 hours drive west of Alice Springs. They arrived at Kings Canyon at about 11:45 a.m. and they set off on a 3-hour hike called the Rim Walk, which is an approximately 6-kilometre loop around the outer rim of the canyon. At about 2:30 p.m, the group arrived at the last lookout of the walk before the descent back down the rim. This lookout is called Kestrel Falls. About 1 metre below the top edge of the cliff at Kestrel Falls is a rock ledge, and over the years it's been used for fun photos, as the coroner called it, and selfies where people would stand on the ledge and sort of pretend to be clinging on for these sort of dramatic touristy photos.
No, this gives me so much anxiety.
Yeah, I've totally partaken in fun photos before in terms of in canyons and stuff where I've sat on edges where I'm like, why did I do that?
Nope, I've never done that in my life and I never will.
Oh,
No, I'm too afraid of heights for that.
This particular ledge is about 1.3 metres wide, sort of coming out of the edge of the cliff, and about 3 or 4 metres in length. So it's actually quite a big...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
It's a big bit of rock.
bit of rock. It isn't flat, though. It does angle slightly down towards the canyon. The cliff...
So an easy thing to maybe stumble off of then.
Slip, trip.
Maybe.
Maybe.
So the cliff also does not have a straight drop between sort of the top of the cliff and the ledge. So it's like, sort of like concaves inwards a little
Concaves
bit.
in? Okay.
Yeah,
all right.
from the top of the ledge. So yeah, it's sort of got a concave in.
So what you're
cliff
saying
face.
though is if you were to tumble off, you're not going to immediately like hit slowly
Something
down? Are you
else.
saying you're just going to have a long
No,
drop?
I'm sort of saying like between where the top of the cliff is and where the ledge is. So just that short spot. So like trying to descend maybe
into there?
onto the
I
rock
see.
ledge. You might
Yes.
have
It's a
some-
challenge.
Yeah,
Okay.
It's,
Sorry.
it's maybe not as easy as you would think it would be.
Okay.
So on this particular tour, the tour guide demonstrated to the tour group the best and safest way to get down onto the ledge, which involved sort of sitting on the edge of the cliff and then twisting around onto your belly and then sort of sliding down until your feet.
You know what?
No.
I think the best and safest way is to not get on it.
Yeah, I think the best thing for the tour guide to do is be like, people do sometimes take photos here. I am not going to tell you how to do it.
I'm going to recommend you don't do it because if you don't tell them how to do it, someone will try.
Yeah,
and
but to
hurt
say
themselves,
this,
but
you should not do this. I can't stop you, but
And I imagine most tour guides do
realistically,
now.
If the tour guide didn't tell them that the ledge was there, it's not like you're going to go over and look over the edge of a
Yes,
cliff at a
very
specific
true.
spot and see that ledge. Like if you don't know
Yeah,
it's
true.
there,
Didn't know if it was there, then you wouldn't have known to
and you
climb
wouldn't
down
know, you
onto
would
it.
have probably looked at it and been like, there's no way of getting down there.
Yeah.
like why would you even think that when you're going on a walk?
I certainly don't.
I wonder if there's a ledge there that I can go slide down onto.
Take a fun photo on.
So a number of other tourists on this particular tour got down onto the ledge for this photo opportunity that was introduced by the tour guide. Zoe was about the 6th or 7th person to get down onto the ledge. So Zoe gave her camera to another tourist and asked if that tourist could take photos of her down on the ledge. Zoe was apparently talking about getting some really great photos and was really excited about getting those photos as she started walking to the cliff and descending down.
So, sorry, the person who's going to take the photos of her is up on the cliff top.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
so
they're not
that's
on the
why
ledge with her.
yeah, okay, they're not on the ledge with her. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's only quite, I mean, although I just said it's a big ledge, like it's
Is
still not
it
that big.
so that they can kind of do a downward view and not see that her feet are actually standing on something, so it looks like she's
So it's a
maybe.
little
off
bit,
the edge of a cliff from
Yeah,
that
that's
angle
right.
down,
So
but she's
so-
actually standing on something.
yeah, that's right. So
Yeah.
it's sort of, I don't think the actual, I mean, you can look at photos on the internet, but I don't think the ledge is that far down. Like it's only a meter or so below, like
Yeah.
the actual top
Yeah,
of the
okay,
cliff.
I see.
And so they just sort of stand on the ledge and then crouch down and
Yeah.
pretend
Yeah,
like,
to be
hanging
hanging
off
on,
the edge
right.
Yeah.
of the cliff to sort of,
Okay.
make it look dramatic or dangerous or, I don't know, a fun photo. So when getting down onto the ledge, Zoe appeared to follow the instructions that she was given by the tour guide. So she first sat on the ledge and rolled onto her stomach. She then put her left leg down and moved her body weight to put her right foot onto the ledge. But her right foot didn't reach the ledge at the moment that she thought it would. And she sort of, as the witness described it, stepped on air, which I take to know is that, when you're
Going down some steps.
going down some stairs and
Yeah.
you think that you're
at the bottom,
at
and
the
then
bottom
you're
and
not
then,
doing more.
and you sort of have that weird like jolting feeling.
Yep.
Yep.
I imagine that's kind of what the sensation was that she had when she didn't realise that the
That's
ledge was
Not where she thought it
not
was.
where she
That's
thought it
terrifying.
was. So the coroner theorised that it was likely because of that concave shape of the cliff face. So as she was sliding down,
Yeah.
her feet must have gone into that concave, and so she thought that her feet were going straight down when in fact they were going
right.
in.
And so
Right.
And so
they
she
weren't as
thought-
close to the ground as she thought
Exactly
they were.
right.
Yeah.
So her feet weren't as close to the ledge as she thought they were, and so she sort of stepped down, and when she didn't
Yeah, meet ground.
realise
Yeah,
that
okay.
it was there, she sort of stumbled backwards, and apparently she reached out to try and grab the top of the cliff, but there was no sort of traction, nothing to grab onto,
Yeah.
and she fell backwards down the cliff about 30 metres onto the rocks below.
That is a long way.
That is horrifying.
Yes.
And were there other people on the ledge at the time?
No, she was
Okay,
the only
she was the
person
only
on the
one, okay.
ledge at that
I
point
was
in
going to say,
time.
because she could have taken someone else with her if she was
could have.
falling.
And I had a look at social media and different photos of people on this particular ledge, and there are photos of like 4 or 5 people standing
Yeah.
together on the ledge because it's quite wide. It's like a 3 to 4 metre wide.
What's the ledge called?
Kestrel Falls. So at the top of Kestrel Falls, there is an emergency call device. So once Zoe fell, the tour guide called the park rangers and asked the rest of the tour group to stay back from the edge. The tour guide repeatedly ran back and forth between the call device and the edge of the cliff to check on Zoe. Zoe was not responding to the tour guide, but was able to make eye contact and was making sort of groaning noises. So she was,
And they could see where she'd landed.
and they could see where she was.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, from the top of the cliff. So after about 25 minutes, the first ranger arrived at the top of the falls. She and a group of other rangers assessed the situation, called emergency services, and determined what medical supplies they could take to Zoe. That ranger continued to stay at the top of the cliff, at the top of Kestrel Falls, with a visual on Zoe while she guided the other rangers at the bottom of the falls to try and find Zoe. So guided them to her location because obviously the terrain
Yeah,
it's
it's
quite
pretty
rough.
rough. Yeah.
down at the bottom of the falls.
So the call point at the top, was that just to get in contact with the rangers? Like,
Yeah,
I'm guessing
that's
there's
right.
no
It was-
reception. They couldn't
No,
call.
it doesn't
there's
go
no
to
reception in that area. So
external
it was just
services.
an emergency call device. If there's an emergency, this is the phone, and it wasn't a portable phone, so that's why she had to keep on running back
Yeah,
to the
right.
phone and updating them on Zoe's situation, then running back to the edge of the cliff and looking down and kept on going back and forth. Yeah, as I said, the ranger continued to stay at the top of the falls with a visual on Zoe while she guided the other rangers at the bottom to Zoe's location. The first ranger reached Zoe around 50 minutes after she fell.
50 or 15?
50.
Oh, that is such a long time.
Yeah, just because the terrain.
Oh,
Yeah,
totally
makes it-
understandable.
yeah.
Sorry, I was just like, but that is a long time
It-
to be
mhm.
lying there.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Ugh.
So the ranger found Zoe lying on her left side and she was wedged between two rocks.
Oh.
It was clear that she had some broken limbs, but of most concern to the rangers was some facial swelling and bruising, which indicated that she had sustained severe head trauma. Zoe was partially conscious. She was trying to sit up, although she seemed very incoherent and was not responding to verbal instructions. About 30 minutes later, Zoe stopped breathing and there were no signs of a pulse. So the rangers were on the phone at that point to a health clinic who instructed them to move Zoe to a flat area to commence CPR. They were able to recover a weak pulse, but after about 20 minutes, the pulse had gone and she had stopped breathing. And at that point, the clinic advised the rangers to stop CPR and Zoe was pronounced dead. So that was about 2 hours after she fell.
Wow.
So this is a little bit morbid, but interesting. So a body bag was sent down the cliff to protect Zoe's body from insects and animals, as it had become obvious that due to that really rough terrain, they wouldn't be able to evacuate Zoe until the next day. And
so they had to leave her there.
So that particular area was often frequented by dingoes.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Oh, that's terrible.
Mm-hmm. But the rangers didn't want to leave Zoe in the canyon overnight, so they ended up setting up camps in the rocks.
Oh, that's so nice of them.
To stay with Zoe, remembering that this is Alice Springs in the middle of June.
Oh, that would have been so cold.
It would have been really, really cold, middle of the desert.
Because they're in the middle of a canyon, so like...
And just in the middle of the desert in general in winter.
So it gets cold. That would have been freezing.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, bless.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really nice that they obviously didn't have to do that.
No.
But it's something they wanted to do.
Something that they felt like, they had to do. And unsurprisingly, the rangers weren't able to sleep that night, so they just lit a fire and waited with Zoe overnight until dawn, and her body was eventually evacuated the next day. So, yeah, that's a sad thing, but also, like, really a little bit heartwarming from the rangers as well.
Yeah,
to actually
absolutely.
Just stay with her and make sure she wasn't alone overnight in the cold. So the tour that Zoe went on is run by a company that was set up in 2006 by two directors, one of which had about 15 years experience in guiding tours in Central Australia. Since 2006 to the time of the inquest, which was in October 2015, the directors estimated that they had conducted approximately 4,800 tours with 92,000 passengers.
That's a lot of people.
A lot of people had gone on their tour.
And that specific tour?
That specific tour.
So 92,000 people had stood on that ledge. Actually, let's assume that not everyone stood on it.
No,
but
not everyone would have stood on the ledge, but 92,000 people maybe had the opportunity to do so. Prior to Zoe's death, they had never had a serious incident before.
That's pretty good statistics then.
Fairly decent.
Yeah.
This particular company is a highly decorated company, having won a number of awards, and was geared towards a younger demographic. And it only operated one tour, actually. It was that 3-day, 2-night tour around Australia's Red Centre. So it was a very specialised tour company that just specialised in the one tour.
Yeah, because most of them do a couple of different things
they do,
around.
but I think...
I'm so interested in their business model, but like, that's kind of irrelevant.
I mean, they're obviously doing very well up until this point.
Clearly a very popular tour.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And to be doing it in June. Interesting.
I mean, it's dry season. Like, it's nice during the day.
It's not too hot. Yeah.
During the day, it's fine. It's just overnight that it gets very cold.
Yeah.
So the training for new guides for this tour company was reasonably extensive and required things like a first aid certificate, familiarisation with the buses and tour content. And there was also a guidebook that guides were to familiarise themselves with. In the guidebook, there was a passage in capital letters that guides should explain to their groups that the rim walk is a guided walk and they must follow the guide and the blue arrows and stick to the path and not go any closer than 2 meters from the edge of the canyon at any time.
That seems reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
But yet they were then instructing people how to climb over an edge.
Exactly right.
But then I guess that comes back to the fact that the guidebook that the company has provided says you shouldn't do this, but it was individual tour guides who are making that decision not to follow the guidebook.
But how many of their guides were
doing
making that decision and or when they were learning and going through their orientation were being told about it. Because, again, it's a cliff that you're not necessarily going to notice.
Exactly.
So if you're coming along as a tour guide, is your person who's training you, there's a good cliff over here for photos.
Yeah.
That's right. And we get
it always comes back to the training, doesn't it?
We get into all of that. So a number of the guides gave evidence at the inquest that a lot of them didn't even recall that particular passage in the guidebook anyway. So
cool.
Kind of mute if you don't even recall reading that you're not meant to go within 2 meters of the cliff edge. But anyway.
I would have thought that would have been a fairly
memorable
not memorable, but specific point you'd kind of want to point out when you're training someone as well, of like, even if you haven't read this whole booklet, please remember we don't want people near the edge.
Yeah.
Please.
So the tour guide for Zoe's group was a young woman who was quite new to the company.
Oh, why is it always the new people?
It always is. This is only the 4th group that she had taken out. She had received about a month's worth of training before taking her own group, and as part of her training, she had gone out with another tour guide on at least 3 occasions as the trainee tour guide. And on each of those tours, the senior tour guide had given the fun photo opportunity to tourists at Kestrel Falls.
And that was 3 different tour guides that she went with, or the same one?
I think it was the same. I don't think they specified it in the report, but we'll go into the sort of systemic issues amongst tour guides just in general in this area. So this obviously leads into one of the key issues examined in the inquest was this practice of getting these fun photos. I don't know how else to explain them.
No, that's fine. I like it.
That's how the coroner explained them. Fun photos at the ledge of Kestrel Falls. There was a significant amount of evidence presented to the coroner that there was a practice within the company to take photographs at this ledge. So there were many of these ledge photos posted on the company's social media, which included photos of several different tour guides posing in the photos with tourists, which all points to the fact that these photos were widespread practice.
And accepted if they were putting it on their social media.
Yeah, they were condoning that behaviour at that point.
Exactly.
However, in the evidence of the directors, they believed that the practice was not widespread and that they didn't know it was happening until they saw the images in the press after Zoe's death.
So you run a company. If you don't ever check on your company's social media, you are not running a company well. Because that is the outward-facing portion of your company.
That you need to be aware of.
Yes. I wholeheartedly agree.
Especially because one of those directors had been a tour guide.
Yeah, that's right. So he was very experienced.
He probably, when he established the company, was running
tours. He would have been running the tours
would have trained all those other people that then trained other people.
Interesting.
So, strangely enough, apparently the directors did not run or have any oversight over the social media pages, which really just doesn't make sense to me.
And, I understand if you don't run it, you have a social media person to do that for you,
but having no oversight.
I agree that even if they had no idea what was being posted on there, if they claim they had no direct oversight of it, it's meant to be an easy click situation, so it's not like it's going to take you long. You just brief look at the front of it and you don't even have to care.
Quarterly or annual performance review of your social media person includes looking at their work.
Yeah.
And there was no sort of mention that there was one person that was responsible for the social media for this company.
Who had a login for that?
I just assume it was the tour guides that were uploading photos of their tours because they were the ones who had access to the photos.
Yeah, and it would have been sense, what's a cool looking photo today?
That's right. Yeah. How are we going to get
people
our image
involved
and people drawn into our tour?
And the fun photos are absolutely going to be the things that draw people in or go viral on social media.
Remember, it's that younger demographic.
Yeah.
So evidence was given from several former tour guides from the company that stated that they were not specifically told by the company to take the ledge photos, but most of the tour guides in the companies did it, as did many other tour guides from other companies. So it didn't just seem like it was a practice within this particular company. It seems like it was a practice more generally to tour companies that ran tours at Kings Canyon. So it's just a well-known thing.
And as a tour company who's running a tour at the same time as some other companies doing those photos, then people are on your tour and they're like, oh, there were some really cool photos that this other tour, these other tourists did.
It's also Alice Springs. It's not a big location. All those people probably know a lot of people.
Yeah, in that industry. Definitely.
Yeah. And so they check this out. We did this cool thing. This is what happens on our tour. You know, they're going to steal it off of others if it's going to attract people into their business.
Mm. So although the directors of the company said that they didn't know about this practice happening, they did concede when they were giving evidence that they should have known about the practice, including because of the photos on social media. And because the tour guides never tried to conceal the photos or conceal the fact that they were doing it. It was never, they never, you know.
They were never thinking, we're doing the wrong thing.
No, exactly. They were like, we're doing this, we're posting it on social media.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't a secret amongst the tour guides that they were keeping from their bosses.
Yeah.
The directors claim they had no knowledge of these risky ledge photos. However, the directors did encourage tour guides to get adventurous photos with their tourists. The coroner found there was sufficient evidence to indicate that the directors encouraged these photos and that the guides did not appreciate the distinction between taking adventurous and dangerous photos.
It's a very thin line at some points. Like,
what is adventurous versus what's dangerous?
I feel like they are the same thing.
Yeah, and
in a lot of cases,
the same thing.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And also, if you're trying to entice people to book with you over another company, it's got to be something significantly distinct from others. And so if you can find something the most risky,
pushing the boundary the most,
that's what's going to draw people in. A certain demographic of people, which is what they are targeting.
Well, that's right.
Again, not going to draw you awry.
No.
But you can see the line of thinking behind it. So it was mentioned by a number of witnesses that the directors were often referred to as cowboys.
Wow.
Yeah, okay.
Which is not a surprise.
But it's also not a description you want to be brought up at an inquest.
No. Not when it comes to running a business. No. And there was an interesting quote by the coroner which said if the directors had paid any attention, they would have known their guides were involved in dangerous practices. In my view, not to know those circumstances could only be the product of willful blindness. In other words, it was convenient for the directors not to resolve their suspicions.
I still find it hard that they still adamantly denied knowing.
Like they're really sticking to that.
They really did stick to it. And they were sort of like, we didn't know. Like they were asked, did you have any suspicions? Yeah, like maybe we had some suspicions, but we didn't know. We had no actual knowledge of it. And then that's when they did concede that they were like, we should have known.
Yeah. Okay.
But we didn't
So
know.
it's like, they were distinctly trying to avoid knowing. Okay.
Yeah. That's right. And that's why the coroner just said, well, it's willful blindness then.
That's not okay.
You're literally...
You're condoning it by avoiding it.
You don't want to. You're avoiding it. You just don't want to see that it's happening.
Yeah.
So because if you don't know that it's happening, then you don't have to do anything about it.
Then you don't have to, do any disciplinary action or rein anyone in or
lose
business
numbers. Yeah,
that's right. So thankfully, the company did make significant changes to the training process following Zoe's death. It included that the directors must take a more active role in training the guides. So the directors actually need to get involved in the training to make sure that people are not training other people to do risky things like taking photos at the edge of a cliff.
I'm totally thinking, and maybe this is because I'm not someone who does a lot of hiking, but I'm like, can you imagine if you established the business, initially started doing all the tours yourself, and then once you got more and more established as a company, you could sit back and have the office hours, and then the coroner coming along and being like, you must actively train your people. Please go walk the canyon again. I'd be like,
I mean, true, but I think necessary.
Yes, definitely.
In this particular situation.
In this instance, maybe.
Yeah. Another change that was made that there's a use of a sign-off register where the guides must sign that they have read and understood the guidebook and permit conditions. We'll get back to the permit conditions in a minute. So their employment contracts were also revised to include forbidding the posing of photos to be posted on social media without the consent of the directors. So now all photos need to go through
approval process.
Wait up. But that's just about posting it on social media.
That's right.
It doesn't explicitly prevent them. Yeah.
That's right. And guides are required to complete and sign off on certain competencies as well. In addition, all tour buses have copies of a notice which was issued by NT WorkSafe, which prohibits any person from going within 2 meters of the edge of the cliff at Kestrel Falls. So they have been told...
Just Kestrel Falls, though? They can go 2 meters to
anywhere
the edge
else
of every other cliff?
Well, this particular notice was in relation to Kestrel Falls. However, we'll get to the permit conditions.
Okay.
There might be some thin tracks and stuff where that might not be appropriate to dictate.
But I think in this case, I've been on the rim walk before and it's not.
And did you take a photo on the risky ledge?
I did not.
Excellent.
Okay, good.
So another aspect that was carefully considered by the coroner was the role of the Parks and Wildlife Commission, which is the authority that oversees Wataka National Park. Tour companies are required to obtain permits to conduct tours at Kings Canyon from the Parks and Wildlife Commission, and a condition of the permit is that all persons on tours must follow all signage and stay at least 2 metres away from the cliff's edge. So it's actually a permit condition that they're required to abide by. And
so did the company lose its permit?
No, it didn't.
Okay.
But that was in place before this accident happened?
Yes, so they had
already part of the permit.
Yeah, so they'd had a permit to operate this tour, and that was a condition of their permit.
They should have lost their permit.
They should have.
Okay,
but
sorry.
We'll get into that.
Okay.
It's also important to note that there are several warning signs around Kings Canyon, which I did see when I went, including it at Kestrel Falls, which is titled Cliff Safety and states, warning, stay away from the cliff edge.
That's pretty clear.
Yeah. It really is. So evidence from the park rangers was that they were aware of the practice of taking ledge photos at Kestrel Falls anecdotally, but they'd never actually seen the practice of it happening themselves. I don't know how much they actually monitor.
Yeah, well, they wouldn't be following a tour group around.
No, that's right.
You know, they've got their own work to do.
So it appeared that the Parks and Wildlife Commission had knowledge of the behaviour of the tour companies at Kestrel Fall, but they had very few mechanisms to enforce the permit condition, which I think the coroner quite rightly pointed out is only half a system. So basically they had the permits, they issued the permits, they took the money from the tour companies, but they never enforced the permit conditions.
Right.
Cool.
The Parks and Wildlife Commission did little to dissuade tour operators and guides from taking tourists to the edge of the canyon. There was never any threat to revoke the permit, and there was no evidence to suggest that tour operators feared the removal of their permits. So they didn't even attempt to abide by the conditions of their permits because there were just no consequences for not abiding by them.
Right.
I guess as an example of there being no consequences, renewing a tour permit, there was no question on the renewal application asking whether the company had ever breached the conditions of their previous permit. So even if they had, theoretically, it would not affect their ability to apply for a new permit.
Right.
Yeah, right.
So
also, again, when are we admitting that we've breached the permit agreement? But that's fine.
Because you know that it's going to impact your next permit. So
that's right. But even if you're found by the
to breach, it didn't matter anyway.
And you breached it, you still didn't have to declare that on your next application anyway.
Yeah. Unhelpful.
It's just, it seems bizarre. But good to know that following Zoe's death, the Parks and Wildlife Commission adopted a 6-point plan to improve its permit system. So firstly, it amended the permit conditions to prohibit the use of photos depicting dangerous activities for marketing purposes.
Okay.
Only for marketing purposes, though.
Yep, again, you can still take them, just don't put them on the internet.
No internet, but you can put them on the internet, but not for
social
marketing.
Media for the company.
Yeah, that's right. So you and I can go there and take the photos and there's no issue. Secondly, it amended the permit conditions to require all tour guides operating in the park to complete an induction course that was conducted by the Commission. So I have more oversight over that. It also amended permit conditions for operators to require all guides to sign an acknowledgement form relating to their knowledge and understanding of the permit conditions, including park safety rules and their own obligations under the Work Health and Safety Act. It ensured that it would monitor permit condition compliance, including through website and social media monitoring and using ununiformed people to accompany tour guide activities.
Oh, that'd be so fun. It'd be like, hey, for work,
Secret shopper.
You need to go attend this tour.
Yes, you need to go on this tour, just act like a tourist.
Pretend to be a tourist.
Just put on your English accent. And
please put on as much sort of like bum bags and cameras.
Yeah,
and a Akubra
hat.
But make sure it's a new Akubra hat.
Oh, it has to be brand new.
brand new.
Out of the bag. Ask lots of questions.
And then ask specifically if you could get on that ledge over there.
Oh, I've seen it in social media posts.
Yep.
That'd be a good day at work, though.
I'd
be on board with that.
It would be. Another part of their permit system was that when reports of breaches were received, it would immediately take effective steps to ensure that there are no further instances of such conduct and notify NT WorkSafe of that information obtained. So actually report issues when they occur. And then lastly, they were to send a letter to all permit holders informing of a zero tolerance policy for breaches of permit conditions, including using photographs of dangerous activities for marketing purposes.
Yeah.
It's actually letting them know what the permit conditions were. And
well, in theory, they knew what the permit conditions were.
Well, they should have. But again, do people really read those things when they're applying for permits? Or
True.
Do they just
again, as a business, you are held liable to, yes.
Well, they weren't. That's the issue.
True.
That's the whole issue in the first place. So the coroner made 3 recommendations in response to this inquest. First of all, that the Parks and Wildlife Commission implement the changes that were outlined in its 6-point plan as soon as possible. Second was that the Parks and Wildlife Commission also consider a revision to the form and content for renewal permits to ensure that they take into account the past performance of the operator and their employees when considering to issue a permit. Makes sense. And the last recommendation was that the tour company continue with the strategies presented in the inquest for better control and understanding of their systems and improved training for their guides. And so I had a little bit of a look on the internet of what happened following this inquest, and it does look like that in 2016, I think it was, so the year after this inquest, this particular company was fined in the Alice Springs local court $140,000 in relation to its negligence, which caused
that is a substantial amount.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what the company's worth, but...
Mm-hmm. And I also had a look and I found an article that referenced that Zoe's parents had filed a civil suit against the company as well, but I couldn't find anything
more about it.
The resolution of that. So potentially they settled, or I'm not sure, but it does appear like this particular tour company is still operating.
Right, okay.
Yeah. Again, if they've then made changes to their practice, that's not unreasonable.
It isn't, but it's also just one of those things, like you think about when you sign up for a tour, right? And you go on this tour, you assume that, first of all, the guides are properly trained. I mean, they're not going to do anything to jeopardize your safety.
They're not going to lead you into harm.
I think I disagree, though, because I have always kind of thought that those people that are wanting to be tour guides are generally pretty outgoing, adventurous, casual individuals that enjoy, imparting that knowledge on others. But also, how many tours have you been on where they've made you sign away your life in terms of, like, we take no responsibility for a few
all of them.
Yeah, so I feel like a lot of those tours are imparting a lot of that risk onto the individual rather than the company.
The responsibility is with the individual, not with the...
Well, that's the company. Right. If you're descending on a cliff face, like, you've got to think
that is inherently risky.
There is an inherent risk to me if I do this. Like, I could fall.
But by the same token, if the tour guide has specifically told you how to do it, like, this is a great place for a photo opportunity. This is how you get from the cliff to the ledge.
And I mean, didn't you also say that
with some
of the croc tours, like they were encouraging them to go in the water because the crocs never bite and stuff?
There is another coroner's inquest, which, I mean, we might do in the future. Yeah. It's kind of a combination between the first episode and this one. But there was, a tour group where the tour guide encouraged them to get into the water, saying that there are only freshwater crocodiles swimming there. And there was a salty and someone was attacked and killed.
Wow.
On the tour group. So clearly...
Yeah, like, I think, again, because it's all with good intentions.
Mm-hmm. Giving people that experience, especially in the NT, like that experience you can't get anywhere else in Australia, right?
And it's so nature-based as well, that experience.
It's nature-based. The canyon is awe-inspiring when you go there. It's incredible. Like, why not? Take this photo at the edge. It's going to be a great memento of your time over here.
So devastating for... Yeah. How old was she again?
23.
Oh, so young.
So very young. And again, just one of those things where, like, you put yourself in that headspace of being that age as well and being on a tour. Like, you wouldn't even think twice about it.
I would have done it.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't have. But I'm afraid of heights, so I'm not the person who would have. But
yeah, at the
I
age
would be
of 23,
more likely to do it at age 23 than I am now.
I 100% would have done it.
Exactly. So I think it's that really tough one.
Yeah.
That I wasn't mature enough to think through the consequences at that age.
No. And at that age, you kind of think you're invincible. You even think, like, if I do slip, I'll be fine. Like...
Yeah.
Yeah, because you've got good balance. You're young. You're fit.
Yeah, exactly. You kind of just don't think about it.
Tough one in terms of a little bit of personal responsibility, but if you're encouraged by someone else.
And shown how to do it by the tour companies, and the fact that the directors of the tour company really didn't have any oversight over the training, and they were clearly not following...
Any of the park regulations.
Of the park regulations, their permit conditions.
Guidebook.
Even their own guidebook. And on top of that, the Parks and Wildlife Commission wasn't even enforcing any of the conditions of their permit. So, if they had been tighter on these things, they wouldn't have been allowed to do these photos in the first place. Yeah. And so none of this would have ever happened.
Yeah, it was all over social media. So, like, people knew. And so is that condoning that behavior again? Like, yeah.
It's tricky. And again, like, all of this is not to say that we couldn't take a flight out to Alice Springs right now, walk along the canyon and go do it ourselves.
Oh, yeah, yeah. There's nothing stopping you as an
individual. It's more just the process of this tour company. And I mean, they're actively encouraging it.
Yeah.
They were showing you how to do it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And I think, if you're doing it on your own, you're taking that risk and you've got to really.
Exactly right.
It's held far more on your responsibility than if you're with others.
Mm-hmm. And interestingly enough, I think there was only one other death that's ever occurred at that ledge before.
That's still too many.
Yep. This particular person was also, ironically, a 23-year-old English tourist.
Oh.
So maybe if you're a 23-year-old English tourist,
just don't visit.
Don't go near Kestrel Falls.
Hold back at least 2 meters.
Please, 2 meters away from the ledge because, things aren't going your way. But it did happen back in 1997 and he wasn't part of a tour group. It was just an individual.
Was that someone who was trying to do the same thing, like get onto the ledge, or like they just fell off the top?
It didn't go into any detail about it. Anyway, so that was a little bit into the death of Zoe Woolmer. Just stay away from Cliff's Edge and don't always listen to everything that you're told by tour guides.
Yeah.
You do have to sometimes
use your own judgment, which I think is also an everyday kind of practice.
That's right.
Of safety.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone, and we'll catch you again next week.
Sounds good.
Bye.
Bye.